All right, Samantha, thank you. A panel of Atlanta leaders discussing racism, policing, and how the city can move forward during the Black Lives Matter movement. Ambassador Andrew Young, interim Atlanta Police Chief Rodney Bryant, Reverend Gerald Durley, a longtime civil rights activist, the man charged with delivering the eulogy for the late C.T. Vivian today. In a virtual event yesterday, they talked about the recent protests, police brutality, and passing the torch from leaders in the civil rights movement to the younger generation. Ambassador Young said law enforcement officers should interact with kids and teenagers in the community to help foster positive relationships. And Reverend Durley really dove into how effective communication is a critical step in the process.
On the police side and the community side, we must understand each other. We cannot assume what a policeman is doing or assume what a civil rights activist is doing. So to communicate, we've got to first understand each other. Second, we've got to respect each other's differences. Too many times when we don't understand, we don't respect. And then the third thing, which I think is the big bugaboo, we've got to learn how to trust each other.
Open and honest conversation here, and it turned personal as well. Atlanta Interim Police Chief Rodney Bryant gave his perspective as an officer and as a black man.
I've heard a number of people talking about their fear of being pulled over. Trust me, I have that same fear. I really do. When I see the blue lights come on behind me, I'm going through my mental Rolodex to see what happened. But I also recognize, maybe different than some of you all, that generally I have to acknowledge the fact that I have a gun in the car, and I have to have that conversation quickly.
The panel also talking about allies and how they're needed. They discussed the need to have people who aren't people of color help to amplify the voices of the voiceless and educate themselves on anti-racism.